Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. Ben Grant, joined as always by JB, and we are here to get you set for the first visit of the season to the nation's capital, and the first game, in fact, between the Toronto Argonauts and the Ottawa Redblacks of 2024. In regular season play anyway. And these two teams have something to play for. The East is getting really tight. It's a mess in the East. It's a mess in the West. And this game is going to answer a lot of questions for us. We got a lot to talk about this week. We're going to talk about Kevin Mittal coming off a great game, PFF, giving him some props as well. And I want to get into a few different topics we're going to try together related to the secondary. We saw an injury in the secondary to DaShaun Amos, and that could be a really tough one. He's been playing so well all season long. We'll address that. We want to talk about as well, like where the Argos go from here. Like how do they, if Amos is going to miss some time, how do they compensate for that? And that maybe ties into some of the moves that were made last week in the secondary where Mason Pierce and Leonard Johnson were released. And that will also tie into our Pick 6 question of the week. I'll get to that a little bit later on. Plus, we've got our usual assortment of game preview, injury report, OCDC, one thing, predictions, put me down for 20, and our CFL picks. All that and more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Let's start with Kevin Mittal. First round draft pick for the Toronto Argonauts. They were, I think, stunned. I think we all were when he was still sitting there when the Argos picked at pick 5. I think we all thought Ottawa was going to take Mittal at 2. They ended up taking Nick Mardner instead. And unfortunately for Mittal, he got injured in camp. Didn't really get out there until, it's been a couple of weeks of coming off the bench. And I think we finally saw a glimpse of it a couple of weeks ago, but we really saw the potential in Kevin Mittal this week with his 3 receptions, and PFF honored him as well. Not as a player of the week. For PFF player of the week, so it was pretty light. When you lose to the Hamilton Tiger Cats, you're not going to get a lot of guys on player of the week nominations, but Flo Remoulade, I think, was the only Argo that made that list. But they did note that he had a receiving grade of 88.5, 3 great catches. 2 of them were explosive plays, 15 yards or more. One of them was this sensational one-hander. JB, is it time for Kevin Mittal to be the starter? Does he replace Richie Sindani in the starting lineup at that inside slot position?
Yeah, I would. I thought he looked terrific. I think I think that makes the most sense. I think Sindani's been fine. To be honest, I would have to, really get into, like, if I want to look at like how effective they are at run blocking, like that's something we don't necessarily get to see. That might be the only reason that he's not quite there. But I think he showed why he was a first round talent, and I think just keep feeding him the ball. I mean, he is the future.
Yeah, and I like that too, and he should translate into a really effective run blocker. I liked his run blocking at Laval. He doesn't quite have that reach, that massive extension that Sindani has, but he's not a small guy. And what I love about what Mittal can bring too, we saw a glimpse of it. Remember, Mittal took a carry out of the backfield a couple of weeks ago and looked really good doing it. That's something that you can add into that. I don't see Sindani running up the middle the same way. Mittal's got great speed. You can use him on jets from that inside position. You can bring him in. You can shift out. Like, I love the idea of you've got Kadeem Carey, let's say, shotgun left side, Mittal in the slot to the right. You could shift Kadeem Carey out. They don't see McMahon anywhere on the field. Now everyone's thinking pass. You've got 6 wide here. And then you just creep in Mittal at the last second, and now you've got a back in there for a handoff. And I think that's just one of the games you can start playing with a player like that. But downfield as a receiver, we see that, like that catch in Hamilton, that one-hander where, I don't think it was a perfect route from Mittal, because it looked like he held up a little early. I think Chad Kelly was expecting him to continue. It was like a seam route, and he was continuing downfield. He sat maybe a little bit too soon, and then suddenly had to turn on the jets and make this spectacular one-handed catch. It came down with it. But yeah, it just shows you what he is capable of. So I think this might be the week. We are a few days away still from getting depth charts, but maybe this is the week that Kevin Mittal is a starter for the Toronto Argonauts. let's get into the DBs, JB. So 3 different topics here. Let's start with DaShaun Amos, because I think DaShaun Amos's loss this week to injury has the potential, like when it first happened and we didn't know exactly what it was. We know it's a shoulder now. We don't know the severity of it. And shoulders can really range in length of time. I'm going to assume that he's going to be out for a little bit right now. And then we'll have to wait and see if this is an extended absence or not, or if he's able to get back much sooner, because we just don't know. I don't have any information. And like I said, shoulders are weird, and can be really, really painful and can be hard to come back from. But sometimes they can also recover really quickly. So he went down. DaShaun Amos, I think, has played as well as anyone in the Argos secondary. I think Royce Metchier's had a great season, but I think DaShaun Amos has been the star of that secondary. And to lose him, even if it's just for a few games, could be problematic. And I want to start looking at how you go about replacing a guy like that in the short term. Like it's a quick turnaround, not just this week, it's a few games in a row. We have 4 games in basically 18 days. So what's the solution for this? What if he has to miss all 4 of these games? Where are you going with this? And what's the immediate answer, JB?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. I mean they do not have a lot of depth back there. I would assume he's probably, I mean, who knows? But usually shoulder, you can probably guess 3 weeks to 4 weeks if it's separated or a sprain. It takes a little while to get back to. So I agree. I don't think it's season ending. But who are they? Who are they going to plug in there that has experience? I was surprised that, I mean, I know there's not much out there on the waiver wire, but the problem is having somebody in there who knows the system. It's such a crucial veteran role to have there. Like it's your coordinator back there you just have to have everybody's role down cold. I don't know. Who do you think, they move over? I think they probably move somebody out of position.
Well, I think they may go with what happened last year when they ended up with injuries at that same spot. Remember, Robertson Daniel went down and DaShaun Amos went down with an injury as well. And they ended up that's where the discovery of Mason Pierce came in. And we'll get to him in just a moment, too. That's sort of like the second tier of this discussion. They moved Tarvarus McFadden from corner into halfback, and he looked great there. And it was a surprise because we didn't expect that to be a natural transition for him. And suddenly he looked like this whole different style of DB, and he was coming in and just walloping everybody. And so maybe that's the most natural thing, because they've got a few guys that have played corner before. And with the return of Quincy Mauger, Priester's played corner. He's played that spot. He's also seen a little bit of time at halfback. Maybe you move McFadden inside, Priester out to corner. Mauger is now your full-time Sam. Like, that's certainly a possibility. So that's one answer. Other answers, I just don't. I don't know. You can try Tunde Adeleke there. He's played some of that spot. That opens up other possibilities too. If you're going, you can make that halfback a Canadian spot.
That's an interesting name there. I mean, the thing is, he works so well with Metier. They work so well together. You just hate to lose that chemistry, because there isn't a ton of chemistry in the defensive backfield. But I like that, and I like the McFadden idea. I think, that's the beauty of having McFadden. He can't do everything you want, but he knows what to do, and he knows what's supposed to be done, and he's a good veteran, and I think that is as valuable as anything. For at the very least, he knows where he's supposed to be and where everybody else is supposed to be, which I think is probably more important necessarily than him being able to flash and make big plays.
And injuries have been such a problem for the Argos this season, and not only just the number of them, they are the most injured team in the CFL, the most man games lost due to injury in the CFL. But on top of that, the timing of it seems like the moment they release somebody, there's an injury at that same spot. As soon as they let somebody go from whatever positional group there is, boom, that positional group gets banged up. We saw it on the D-line. We saw it at cornerback. We now again see it this week, and that will transition us into the next part of this. And we'll tie this all together in just a moment when we get to our pick 6 question too. Mason Pierce and Leonard Johnson both released last week. And we haven't even mentioned, Kenneth George Jr. I should have even mentioned earlier, like they were released. They made way for some injury returns, but also the pickup of Kenneth George Jr., cornerback who played halfback for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Now, I like him a lot more as a corner than I do a halfback. But another name, like maybe that's one that worked in reverse. Like they pick up this guy, he gets a full week of practice in, and maybe now you do try to plug him in this week, and he could play corner, and you move Tarvarus to McFadden, or maybe he goes in at that halfback spot. I'd be more tempted to do the other way around, but that's an option. So comment on maybe right before we get to Pierce and Johnson, thoughts on adding Kenneth George Jr. to this mix, or is it too soon?
It feels soon. I know he's not a rookie, and certainly when you watch him on the field, he is fast. He's immediately, he catches the eye. But I just think that position is one where you just have to know, if you're going to play different zones, you just have to have structure to it. You just have to have people who know exactly where their part of the zone is. And, I would lean towards McFadden. I think also at halfback, you want some physicality at that position. That would be my hope is that they would try McFadden. I like George Moore at the corner, to be honest.
Yeah, me too. I see it's just so much more natural for him. And I think that, you have fewer moving parts maybe in that case. And I know people might say, well, what's the problem? Why can't he? He's been here for over a week. Priester came in and started right away. McFadden came in and started right away. But those were both guys that were familiar with the team. They had played not quite in this version of the Argonauts defensive system, but McFadden had. But they were really familiar with the guys around them. And so that made it was still rushed, but it made it possible.
It's too bad Pierce dropped off. I don't know what happened there. I don't know if he had a nagging injury, or just didn't gel with the new with the new strategies put in. But he just didn't. He really flashed last year. He got them. He got coached the Saskatchewan job, for God's sakes.
I know.
And and he just did not flash this year that same way. I don't know. I think probably sometimes it's just tough if you're not 100% healthy from the get-go. It's tough to jump on a moving train. So I think that was unfortunate.
Yeah, I don't with Mason Pierce, because I agree with you. Like last year, he was on pace to be an all-star. He just came in too late because he was in for the Robertson Daniel injury. That's when Mason Pierce was sort of discovered. And yeah, he was like lightning. In those last few games he played, he was playing at an all-star level. Had he played the whole season at that position, unquestionably a CFL all-star at that level that he was contributing at. And the player you're referencing, if you're new this year and you haven't heard this podcast before, there was a game against Saskatchewan last year where Mason Pierce won the Argos the game and lost Saskatchewan the game. And it's our belief that had that Saskatchewan game turned into a win for the Riders, they probably make the playoffs. Actually, they definitely make the playoffs. They keep their coaching staff because of that. Corey Mace is maybe still in Toronto. And so that interception by Mason Pierce set in motion this whole major series of events. Maybe it doesn't work out that way, but that's what it seemed like to us. And I think you actually called it at the time. I think you said after that game, well, there goes Corey Mace.
Thanks a lot, Mason.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's too bad. Like, I mean, it would not shock me if they gave him another run, but I don't know. I don't know if the current, he wasn't performing quite to that level, but you're looking for a halfback. He wasn't performing at that level. They wanted to give Milton a shot, and Milton's looked really good. Like that. Yeah, he has looked really good actually. Now, I think they're using him correctly,
right?
But he has looked good in how they're using him.
But now you need another halfback, and Mason Pierce knows how to play halfback. And now he
Yeah,
hasn't
maybe.
really been on the field side, but I would actually suggest he's more suited to the field side, even though he's only really played the boundary side in Toronto. But I'll give you my thought on why he's maybe struggled. I don't know if there's, like you said, a nagging injury. There is so much. Like, one of the most underrated things that it just doesn't get talked about enough in professional football is how injured these players are all season long. We know because we see injury reports. Oh yeah, this guy's banged up. I'm telling you, like, you do not understand the level to which these guys are banged up. Like, every day for them when they get out of bed, normal people like us sitting at home, we would not be going to work that day. We would not be getting out of bed, and they're getting out of bed and they're training and they're getting ready to play a football game. The level of injury and the pain tolerance that these guys have is incredible. And so maybe he has been battling something all season long, and that's contributed. But to my eye, it's been the change in system that's a little different. Remember Mason Pierce last year, the corners that he's working with, he's got Jamal Peters and he's got Quantez Stiggers. Those are the corners. And those are big physical corners that play the flats and allow Pierce to really range over top of them and sort of be that ball hawk, use his speed to his advantage. And he didn't have to come up and be a big hitter because he had Peters and Stiggers doing that for him. And now suddenly when you got speed on the outside and guys like Benji Franklin, who just have a different style of game, more suited to what the coaching staff is doing this season, maybe that is kind of not exposed Pierce, but it's asking him to do things that he's not as good at when compared to last year's system.
Yeah, I think it just speaks to the idea of how important scheme fit is for so many different people. You know, like look with Curly Gittins and Chad last year. Just You know, it just didn't fit. It just didn't work. There's no rhyme or reason. Didn't mean Curly Gittins stopped being a terrific wide receiver. They just did not vibe the same way on the field.
Look at Cam Judge with the Argos. It looks amazing as a Stampeder.
Yeah.
It comes out as an Argo.
That's the all-time weirdo. I'm going to chalk that one up to some kind of hidden injury that they didn't talk about. But because he did not look good.
No, but he is really good.
And he's really good against the Argonauts.
He's good against he's a really good Stampeder, but it just didn't work here.
He's really good, except for
he was banged up. He was, but still, like the level difference was.
Yeah. No,
was
it's
weird.
just I mean, it's just an underrated aspect of. Look, there are players who, sort of supersede scheme, and like are just great players and simply override a scheme, but most are not. Most players need to be used, in a particular way to be successful, and some are lucky to be in a situation, and sometimes that situation changes, and and you have to go find a new team.
If it's me making the call, I bring back Mason Pierce because it's a guy I know. It's a guy that knows the system. And I think if you're worried about the speed of like plug and play, and they haven't tried out a delicate halfback this season, at least on game day. They haven't tried Tarvarus at halfback on game day yet this season, even though they know it's last year. They know he's got it. I just think instead of moving all these pieces around, you bring back Pierce, you put him in Amos's spot, and everything else can stay the same. Like, that's, to me, that makes the most sense, but we'll see. They obviously have players on this roster they're excited to get a look at too. So there's that. And maybe this is that opportunity to see these guys play and to see Kenneth George on the field and see Tunde Adeleke out there. So we'll have to see how that goes. What about Leonard Johnson? Now, he was a guy that you loved from day one of training camp. And I think I give you credit for discovering him because I didn't even notice him on the first day. It took me about a week to appreciate what he brought to the table. And he looked really good. He had a couple ups and downs in the first couple weeks of the season, but it just didn't quite work out for him. The staff didn't seem totally pleased with what he was doing. He ended up getting replaced. He was a starter, remember, for several weeks. I think at least 3 weeks in a row. He was a starter for 5 weeks of the season.
He kind of lost out to Franklin. It seemed to be kind of a race between the two guys. I liked him. I thought he was really twitchy and was like, really closed on the ball well and was aggressive and physical with underneath routes. But I think he did have problems in zone, and I think they felt like they sort of had him in Franklin. So like it didn't. I think that he just kind of got squeezed out a little bit there. But I still I wouldn't be surprised if he's around, because he certainly to me looked like he had elite underneath closing speed. But they just, I don't know, they just, maybe he just couldn't make the transition between the man and the zone, and they just couldn't take the bus.
And this gets us into our Pick Six question. Still on the same theme. This is Peter Cooper is our Pick Six winner. Pick Six is a segment brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. This is one of the best segments of the show, because we're able to give away a 6-pack every week from Something in the Water Brewing. If you send us your questions when we ask for them, and we choose your question to answer on the pod, you win the 6-pack from Something in the Water Brewing. So Peter Cooper, you are this week's winner. And his question is just so theme appropriate. He says, the secondary seems to be hot and cold this season. Is it a personnel issue or a scheme issue? And kind of tying in together what we've said, I'm going to start this one and then I'll turn it over to you, JB. But first of all, remember, this is not the same defensive system that Coach Mace had in last year. There are similarities, but it's calling on the DBs to do a lot of different things, and they've got a very different style of personnel doing it. They've gone away from the big physical corner and instead are going for speed. You can see that across the secondary. You got from like Edouard is a speed guy. Obviously, he's banged up right now, but when he comes back, I wouldn't be surprised to see him step into that starting corner spot again, because he's got that speed. Franklin is blazing fast. Milton is really fast. So that's something they're clearly interested in. And that's a tough adjustment when you are going from one system to another in a secondary. But you add to that the fact that you've now got pieces moving all over the place. So just to give you a sense of what's happened through this first half of the season, they've had 5 different, very different groupings of players out there in the secondary. Like for the most part, you've had Metier and Amos there as the sort of consistent parts, but everything else has moved around. And Amos, of course, we're not expecting to be there this week. So yet again, there'll be another change. It'll just be Metier. Like he's the only guy going to this week's game who will likely still be in the same spot that he started in to start it all off. All the other 5 DBs, including the Sam linebacker, have moved around. So the season began with Johnson and Franklin on the corners. And then you had Mojé playing the Sam spot. And that lasted for a couple games, but then Franklin and Edouard became the corners, and Franklin switched sides, went from field to boundary. Edouard came in on the field side, and then Mojé got injured. Priester came in at the Sam backer spot, and then Edouard went down. Pierce played corner briefly, and then you had McFadden called back into service, and then Priester still playing Sam, but now Mojé is back, and so they're trying to work both those guys in together. And now, of course, we're going to see, and then Milton, of course, came in for Pierce as well. We had Amani Dennis played. He started for 2 straight games at halfback. It's just been a mess. It's been all over the place, and you can't develop any kind of consistency and communication if it's musical chairs in your secondary every week. It's really tough. Same thing with receiver groupings. If you keep moving guys around again and again and again, it's so hard to get any kind of rhythm or chemistry built. And so I think it's a combination of system and then injuries dictating personnel changes, and just the case of a couple guys not working out that they have to move on from. This is where you jump in and give your 2 cents.
I was agreeing with you.
You were nodding invisibly there.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, look, sometimes I have 2 cents, sometimes I don't.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's like, to me, that's the issue. Like, I don't think the scheme isn't flawed. It's not like you've got Coach Fields, Coach Iben out there doing something that doesn't make sense. It does. It makes sense. They've also, I think, got the right people to do it. It's just that you keep getting injured, and so you keep having to change up the board. So I don't think they should abandon it. I don't think they should go back to what they were doing last season, because they don't have those people. They don't have those pieces anymore. You keep doing what you're doing, and you just have to trust that this is a long season, and by the end of it, you'll have, when guys start getting healthy and coming back, it's going to work out. If you've got, whether it's Edouard coming back, Mojé back to full health and feeling 100%, whether it's Amos coming back, whenever that may be, the guys are there they will come together. You've seen it. And that's the thing. If we hadn't seen flashes, if we hadn't seen even entire games where the secondary played really well, then I would worry. But we have seen that. It's just, every time it feels like things are going really well in that secondary, something else goes wrong, someone gets hurt, and we're back to square one again. So, Peter Cooper, thank you for your question. I hope you enjoy your 6-pack of delicious beer from Something in the Water Brewing. I think we have talked as much about the defensive secondary as we ever have on an episode of the X's and Argos podcast. So we will move on from this, JB. Let's get into this week's game in Ottawa. This is a moment, JB, it's a moment of vindication that I'm looking for, because all season I have maintained that the Ottawa Redblacks are not in the second tier of teams in my personal power rankings.
Fraud.
And yet every week the Ottawa Redblacks have made us look stupid because they've gone out and won games that we swear up and down they're going to lose.
I mean, let me just double check it because I saw it earlier. I mean, they are 6-2 against the West. 6-2-1. I mean, they're just feasting on the West.
Yeah, the West has been a problem for the Argos that way, in that they've been losing to all of the non-Argo teams, and then the Argos have struggled against in a couple of games. They've done well at home. They swept the entire West at home, but it's been tough on the road, losing in Calgary, losing in Saskatchewan.
And the schedule makers just have not given them any Eastern games.
Yeah, so you believe this is going to be the beginning, perhaps, of Ottawa's comeuppance?
Yes. This will be payback for all of those games I had to watch on their poorly lit football field. I don't see it. Like, the only thing they're elite at is kick return. They are fine and they move the ball, but they don't run particularly well. They don't throw particularly well. They take penalties a little more than they should. But somehow their defense is fine, but it's not elite. It's not particularly effective at stopping the pass or particularly effective at stopping the run. They're decent at stopping the run. They're an average team. They should be a 9-8 team. That's who they should be. They should not be pushing. I think this is where Toronto has to really snap in and become the number 2 team in the East here and go on a bit of a run here, because they just simply can't let Ottawa do this.
So let's take a look at the injury report before we start getting into the specifics of this game and how it will go down, because I do think that could maybe play a factor here. And aside from the injuries themselves, they moved on from Rock Armstead this week, which was a little bit of a surprise.
There's got to be some internal stuff there.
Well, he's been getting penalties like every game. Like, I'm sure they were just sick of it. Like, you just can't get a 15-yard penalty every single game and run your mouth on the field. And as good as he is, because he's leading their team in rushing, he's clearly was their best back. They've gone in a whole different direction, and putting Morrow in there, and we'll see how that works for them. I think Armstead's probably the better player. He certainly looked really good on the field. Yet I think coaches, like Coach Dice, you just can't keep doing that. You can't keep taking these 15-yarders at inopportune moments. And I think he had enough of it in that BC game against the Lions in Victoria. So they moved on from him. So we'll see what that changes up. Other than that, Bryce Carter not practicing, Devontae Dedmon not practicing with the hand injury. The rest of the guys, I think, are all going to be able to go. So it's a relatively, compared to the Argos, they're a healthy group. The Argos, meanwhile, today, DaShaun Amos, we've already mentioned, did not practice with the shoulder. Brandon Calver with the knee did not practice, and that injury did not look good at all when he came off the field. Didn't look like, man, everything bad. He tried to come off himself and just couldn't make it. And knowing how tough Calver is, that he had to go down and get helped off, wasn't a great sign. Like, Maybe this is not a season ender, but I don't expect him to be around this week. DeVaris Daniels with a groin injury was limited. I'd like to think he'll be able to go. Ryan Hunter was off today for personal reasons. Hopefully everything's okay with him. And then Jordan Williams, which is a really good sign. He looks about ready to come back, and that's a boost for the D-line if he is. He was able to go full coming back from that ankle injury. So maybe reinforcements coming there for the Argos. With that said, this squad, let's get into it. OC-DC. We'll start off with the Ottawa Redblacks. I'll give it to you first, JB, and look at the Redblacks defense. If you are coordinating the Ottawa Redblacks, what do you do this week to stop Chad Kelly and the Toronto Argonauts offense?
Well, I mean, I think it is demanding, because even in Toronto's loss, they're still putting up a lot of points. I think it's very hard to, I think I do think your only hope to beat Toronto from this point forward is that you're going to put 30 up, because I think Toronto is going to put up 28 points. I think you can pretty much, write in with marker 28. So what do you do with that? Ottawa is good at stopping the run, but I don't think that is what makes it tick, and I don't think that's what's going to make the difference. I think you try and do what Hamilton did, which is give Kelly. I think much like teams played Joe Flacco for a long period. You just take away that deep stuff. You play a shell over the top. You can play 3 or 4, and you just force him to take the underneath stuff and see if he'll Fajardo his way down the field. And he doesn't want to be Fajardo. He wants to be, Mario Andretti. So like that is the challenge. Like, he wants to make passes that maybe there isn't space there. He is a risk taker, and you want to try and, I think, bait him into throwing outs, bait him into throws that he trusts his arm to make, and take those, and then essentially, see if he has the patience. I think that's the book on him, and I think that's the way to play him. I mean, that's the way I would play him. The O-line has been okay, but I think Toronto has shown that you can get pressure, and then I would mix in pressure, especially in obvious passing downs, because I think that Chad is always looking down the field, which is a great trait. It's tough to teach that, to have your eyes downfield, but he probably needs to get rid of that ball quicker to hot routes, in obvious passing situations or in 2-minute drills, because you can really crank up the heat and come after him on those, because he's waiting for plays to develop, because he wants to throw that dagger. So if I'm Ottawa, I think that's how you have to play him, kind of force Chad to beat himself, and that's how you play it.
And I thought Chad was pretty good at not, like, there weren't a lot of deep shots down the sideline and stuff last week. Like, Hamilton
but I thought so too after the first quarter.
Yeah.
But it only, you only have to.
By then it was 21-3.
Yeah, right. I mean, you only needed a couple of times. So I agree with you. I thought he did take down his stuff, and I think he will. But it's not in him. It's not his natural thing. Like it.
Well, because even his underneath stuff is like 25-yard dig routes.
Right. It's what makes him a star. He wants to, gunsling, and it's what makes him great. But if you can have a defense which is, just boring enough to constantly take it away, I think that is where you run into stuff, and that's where Toronto has to, as you mentioned on your side, is like stick with that running game, and with Chad getting his running feet under him again too, like when they run those 3-man rushes, take those 3 yards.
And we'll switch to the other side of the ball, looking at the Ottawa Redblacks offense. I put the run game away largely. I know Hamilton was actually able to run against Toronto. That's an anomaly. Toronto's been allowing about 70 yards rushing per game. They let up 140 against the Ticats. I still have no idea how. It just didn't look like. It just didn't look like the regular Toronto defense, and I don't see that as being a consistent thing. They were a little bit embarrassed this week by that performance. The whole team was. You shouldn't lose to the Hamilton Tiger Cats twice and in the same season with a team that's only won 3 games. And so I do expect them to step up. I don't think Ottawa is going to be able to run the football, and I'm not going to waste a lot of downs trying. And if I do, I'm going to see if I can get that speed to the outside more than go up the gut. I think most part, shots downfield that aren't go routes. I think Toronto's done a pretty good job of taking away the straight goes. It's the other stuff that they've struggled with, deep digs, double posts, overs with underneath action to freeze backers or to maybe even draw in safeties and halfbacks, double moves like wheels from the slot fades, sluggos.
Yeah, zone beaters.
Yeah, like all of that stuff, like test the Argos. We talked about this earlier with the moving pieces. That's what went wrong last week. You look at those 2 big touchdowns. On one, it looked like Metier kind of got drawn in by a route coming across in front of him. Suddenly there's a post from the other side going over top. And then the other one looked like a miscommunication on kind of like an old school wheel. Like it was like an out and up and from the slot to Tim White. And it really was the only one that was sort of like a straightaway go was that last play where the Argos are in 0 and they're looking for run. And yeah, that was a great throw.
They didn't cover the out or the up.
No, well, because again, they were banking on like we got to stop the run on this down or something short. They're playing the sticks, and they went for a 45-yard pass instead. But yeah, that's something that. So I think as Ottawa, you got to attack with all those zone beaters, really force the Argos to communicate, especially knowing that there's probably going to be some more new pieces in there again this week. Turn it into an air show, like every down. Get Drew Brown to fire that ball downfield and see what you can come away with. Because you know, like you said, you're going to have to score. You got to score at least 28. And I just don't think you're going to do it with short stuff. The trouble Ottawa's got is that they've got so many moving pieces at receiver. We'll see how that goes. They've had some injury issues at that receiving spot. That's going to be interesting to see what comes of that. Let's switch over to the good guys, JB. I'll give you the start. Toronto's defense. How do you shut down this maybe new look Redblacks offense with the moving pieces that they've got?
Yeah, I don't know what that's going to look like. You know, like I know he's more of a vet, but I mean that's tough to come off the street and play.
Can I just jump in on that let me just jump in on that for a second, because we've talked before about how running back's one of the few positions where you can kind of come in and go, because it's a lot of the stuff's very similar. But where I think it is tough, it's the mesh timing, it's the footwork with the quarterback. Like that, to get a really clean handoff takes repetition, it takes time. And so the plays aren't going to be the issue. That the language isn't going to be the issue for him coming into this offense. It's just going to be those little things where that lost step in your handoff is enough for the Argos defense to be all over you. And so I do think, like, coming off the street, it's not that he doesn't know these run plays. He's run all of Ottawa's run plays before, but it's the timing, it's the precision, the footwork with Brown.
Yeah, no, and look, he's a vet, and he will be good. I mean, that's a bold look. I can tell. Like in Ottawa, they're not full and run. I think they're a very well coached team. I think that, and that full respect that they had a guy who was a goof, and they're having a season that despite our our accusations, they're having a great season. They're number 2 in the East. I mean that is not an easy decision to throw that guy off your boat at number 2, because all you need to do is see him in double blue for the rest of the season. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that is a potential. Somebody's going to pick him up. He's incredibly talented. I mean, unless the word is really poisonous, I can't imagine somebody doesn't give him a shot. Edmonton, but I think if you're Toronto, I think it's time for. I thought the pass rush played pretty well against Hamilton. I'd like to see that to continue. I think Ottawa is not great at stopping the sack. Really like Toronto, unfortunately. So I want to see pass rush here. I want to see them. I want to see them really get after Ottawa. Let's not Ottawa is not great at anything, and I don't think you need to scheme up Ottawa. I think this is a team that you should be able to get after. I think you should be able to, mix in, do your standard mix. You got some underneath man, you got some underneath zone, you got, sometimes you give them a deep look in obvious pass situations. I don't think you need to load the box to stop the running back, but I think we want to get more quarterback sack pressure. I think that's an aspect that it's good, but it's not always there. It kind of comes and goes, and then like you can go a whole quarter and a half without it. I'd like to see a little more consistent, but I think Toronto is the better team. I think that you don't need to really scheme up here. I think you can do your standard mix of man and zone and your standard mix of, run stop on first down and pass defense on second down. And not that you're playing vanilla, but I think sometimes you play teams that you don't have to get into the lab. And I don't think out of the team you have to get in the lab to, despite their record. I think you just have to tackle well. And I think you have to, you just have to make sure that you're getting after that quarterback and not giving them time to get to the field and not giving away free yards on quarterback rushes. They play a not exciting brand of football. I really would love to see Toronto kind of put a stamp on this, like a defensive stamp, and kind of really, really flex. I know it's hard without Winton, but I would like to see like a game where the defense really kind of showed that they're a championship defense.
Switching to the other side of the ball, for Toronto, I think you want to attack short, middle, and deep outside. That's the two areas I would go after this week, because I think Chad Kelly, now with a few games under his belt, you're focusing your film on those games. You're not looking at Chad Kelly from last year. If you're Ottawa, you've got these two games to really study and break down now. And when I go back and look at those two games and sort of see like where there seem to be vulnerabilities, where Toronto seemed to be able to successfully attack, the voids that got left out, especially this past week, there is going to be some aggression from the Ottawa linebackers in trying to get outside quickly. Think back to those quick passes that Chad was making to Tarvarus to the slot, where a linebacker almost got there, just missed getting to the football, and Tarvarus caught it and was able to turn it into a first down. I think you're going to see, especially from like guys like a Darius Pickett, for example, are going to be flying outside to try and pick these off, to try and disrupt. And I think that's going to leave some space in the middle of the field. I think you're going to get those guys to widen out when they know it's not a run play and they're looking past. And that's where I don't mind getting the running back involved. Run Kadeem Carey on these Texas routes. It's like a diamond shape where he cuts on like a 45 degree to the outside and then cuts 45 degree back in, ends up right in the middle of the field. Those routes I think are going to be there. I think you're going to find middle hooks and stuff to the running backs as well. Even running back screens, middle screens, which we still haven't really seen Toronto run. So I think you can attack the middle of the field that way. And I want to see 50-50 balls, because Coxie and Chad Kelly have that working, and they didn't really go to it last week. I was waiting for it against Jamal Peters. It didn't happen. I think there's some vulnerability there that the Argos can take advantage of this week. I wouldn't even mind getting Tarvarus outside too. I know he's on the field, but you can move guys around. Get him on the outside, take a shot to him, because he bodies so well on those plays and wins a lot of those 50-50s as well. So I think that has to be part of the strategy. And then the one last thing I want to see is a double move from Ungerer. We've talked a lot on this podcast about how we love those comeback routes he runs for like automatic first downs for like 12, 15-yard gains way on the outside. I think the other team has seen that enough now that on a situation like a 2nd and 10 where they're looking sticks, if you run under Ungerer 12 yards, turn around, and then go again, you're going to leave the DB in the dust. So I think this is one of those occasions to take advantage of that. That's my plan for Toronto's offensive attack. What's your one thing, JB? The one thing that the Argos have to do this week to guarantee a win?
Well, look, I thought the sacks would be enough to get it done against Hamilton. That's such a disappointing game. It should have been. Had they not dug themselves an immense hole. It
turned out to be turnovers. Like that was the correct answer, I think, for one thing. They needed a turnover. With one turnover, Toronto wins that game. but it just never came.
No, they have not been a great turnover team. But I think, the sacks have been coming. Um, yeah, I mean, I'd like to see, I would love to see the other team kept under 250 yards. I'd like the defense to go out there and be like, okay, this enough. We're going to go out there and we're going to show, much like Winnipeg does, not every game, but show that gear. Like, we can come out here and we can close down this passing game, and let's keep the passing yards under 250.
My one thing's pretty similar. It's just more specific. Rushing yards. I want under 75 rushing yards, and that's been about their season average. Wow. But that's been their average. Their average this year. They lead the league in that category. They've just got to do that again. Get their usual game. They let up 140 last week. Let's get back to 75. That was the number they've been able to do.
They're the team they should be able to do it against. I mean, I know they're not 100% healthy, so like I can't really pound the table about it, but nevertheless, here I am.
And prediction for this week, I've got Toronto 28, Ottawa 20. I don't, and again, I'm so tired of Ottawa proving. Now, I got it right last week, finally. BC beat Ottawa, and I actually had it. But my record picking Ottawa this year is not good. So 28-20, a Toronto win. How do you see it falling, JB?
Well, look, it's interesting because Ottawa is undefeated at home. Toronto is not very good on the road. That's something that they need to address. I don't think it's become a thing yet, but because a lot of those games are very, very close. Like easily Saskatchewan this could have been a win. So I don't think it's a thing, but to make sure it does not become a thing or a conversation piece, let's go into Ottawa, let's go into the underlit dome of death, and take back the crown from the pretender. So I like Toronto 35, Ottawa 21.
Yeah, and you're right about the road thing. Like the Saskatchewan game could probably have been a win. They did win on the road in Montreal. Both Hamilton losses were by 3 points. Both games they really should have won. They should have won in Calgary. They were up big in Calgary and let that one slip away. Like they could easily be undefeated on the road this season and yet have lost all but once. So
no, I think go in Ottawa, but bring an end to any on the road conversation. Bring an end to Ottawa's underlit dreams.
It's time for Put Me Down for 20. And we were a little hit and miss last week. Overall, we were both up slightly because of the juice. And I think I found something. And you know what they say about gamblers with a system.
You solved gambling?
I've solved gambling.
I'm excited. Let me get my pencil out here.
Yeah. So before we give you our picks, I want to tell you not to take any of our picks seriously. Certainly do not risk your hard-earned money on anything we think, because we clearly don't know what we're doing. But it's for fun. We're betting Golden Fleeces. We both started with 200 on the year. I think I got up to like 250, but I've been on a slide for a while now. You've been hovering around the 200 mark all season long. So right now I'm at 207.5. You're at 187.7. But I had a win last week that was a revelation for me. I set my own point spread for the BC Lions over Ottawa. I set it all the way up to 8.5, and that paid at plus 230. And I feel like that's now my solution going forward. So with that in mind, my two wagers, I have set new point spreads. So for the Argos, I've got the Argos minus 6.5 for plus 250 Golden Fleeces. I'm wagering 10 Golden Fleeces on that. And then I've got Saskatchewan minus 2.5. So they're dogs right now. I'm picking them as 2.5 point favorites, and that pays at plus 136. So those are my two plays for this week. JB, where are you going with your hard-earned Golden Fleeces?
Well, I feel good because I think last year I had to go to Zeus for a re-up before the end of the season.
You did. It was like mid-September. It was about right now. Yeah.
So currently, I feel like things are okay. I've got some grinder picks here. I think that I'm going to start with the Argos plus 102 first half lead. Not the sexiest wager I've ever made, but sometimes you got to pay the rent. So I like the Argos to get out to a first half lead. I like them to win, and generally speaking, they win when they when they have a lead. The statistics are actually really stark. You would think it's obvious, but I mean, basically, like when they have a lead at the end of each quarter, their winning percentage over the last 10 years is about 600. And when they don't have a lead, it drops down to about 225. So, yeah, I like them to win. So I got a first half lead. And I'm going to jump into the Montreal game. I think Fajardo wants to kind of put his name on that Eastern MVP that currently might be residing in Hamilton. So I like Fajardo to throw over 1.5 touchdowns. With Summer calling a Grey Cup warm-up, a Grey Cup potential. I'm really excited to watch that game, actually, much more than another Edmonton-Calgary game, which I just could not be less excited to observe.
So I've got that at plus 118 on Fajardo over 1.5 touchdowns.
Yeah, 118 there. Thank you.
All right, let's get to our picks. We were both 2-2 last week. So on the season, I'm 32-19-1. You are 27-24-1. I've got honors this week. So BC at Montreal. I think I'm going to take Montreal here. I love how BC looked last week, and I think this game's going to be really close. If I were betting, I wouldn't go anywhere near this game, but I think Montreal coming off a bye at home, I think that's the difference. BC, we know what that long road trip is like going the other way and how hard it is for the Argos traveling that far west. Same thing for the Lions coming this way. And so Lions in Montreal off a bye. Montreal's a really good team. And so I think they're going to win, but I think it's going to be really tight. It's going to be a great football game. Who are you taking?
I am going to take... Oh God! You know what? I'm gonna take your BC Lions.
Right.
I'm gonna take BC there. I know Montreal at home is formidable. I think that coming off the bye as well, they're gonna be well rested. Fajardo, I still like Fajardo to throw those touchdowns. I think BC's found a little something here. So I think they might go on a little run here.
All right, and our second game, Toronto at Ottawa. I've taken Toronto. Are you going to hedge, or are you still sticking with Toronto?
I know. I like Toronto over Ottawa.
And Saskatchewan at Winnipeg, the Banjo Bowl. I'm going to take Saskatchewan in this one as well, like I did in the spread. I'm not sure about this game. I feel really uneasy about it, but I kind of felt going into the Labor Day Classic that they would split. I thought it would be the other way around. I thought they would each win at home. I still think it's tough to beat the same team in back-to-back weeks. So I'm taking the Riders, but man, they're banged up on that O-line. So I'm not super confident about that one. Where are you going?
I mean, you know what? I've been riding Winnipeg. Like I said, I felt like they were the giant awakened. I'm going to keep riding Winnipeg until I get new information. So I like Winnipeg there.
And
as Calgary, much as I do like Saskatchewan.
Then Calgary at Edmonton to wrap up the weekend play. I am going with the Elks. The Elks are playing good football right now. Calgary has got nothing going. I know Jake Mayer rebounds really nicely. We're not even sure at this point in the week that he's going to get the start, though. So they kind of left that a little up in the air, it sounded like today. Calgary at Edmonton. I've got Edmonton. Who do you have, JB?
I have Calgary. I'm not buying the Edmonton Express, and although that's a good name, I don't like either of these teams, and I don't want to bet on either. But I will take Calgary because I think those two teams are built for splits.
Saturday afternoon, 1 o'clock Eastern time start. Toronto at the Ottawa Redblacks. That will just about do it for us on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.